Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
RJ, what a difference a week makes. The Kraken have lost 3 in a row, 4 if you count the OTL in New Jersey. They have 4 points in their last 7 games, and their only win is against the New York Rangers, who are the worst team in the Eastern Conference. The Ducks have won 4 in a row. The Sharks are 7-3 in their last 10, and the Kings even have a streak of 3 straight OTLs. What is happening, RJ? Is it time for Kraken fans to call Rico about the West waking up? Where are we at? Is it time to hit the panic button? That's going to be what we talk about on the pod today, but it has been a wild swing from where we were at last week and the week before.
Yeah, it feels like the mood definitely has shifted, and you know what? I feel like we're kind of used to it for this team. They're long, their 11 game skid, their 9 or 10 game, the win streak and everything that was going on, and now kind of back on the losing end of it. I think we can officially call this team streaky.
Yes, I think I brought this up not last week, but the week before, about the idea of them going on the wild swings just to get back to like 500, right?
Yep.
Like that is just how this team is going to work. They're just going to hyperbolically swing up and down, but ultimately kind of end up in the middle. And it really does genuinely feel like we're back on that ride, and this is one of the dips. And hopefully it doesn't last too long, I guess.
Yeah, I guess maybe we need to just look at the rest of the schedule and time it out to see if they'll end on a good note or a bad note. They're roughly like 10 games at a time. We should be able to map this out.
That is true. So maybe around, I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't last the entirety of this home stretch. It should, according to like that, it should kind of pick up around the Washington or Toronto game right before the team then leaves town. So
yeah, close out the homestand strong, have a big, good road trip up until the Olympic break. And then the next slump will be early March.
Yeah. There you go. Everybody just set your calendars. No need to freak out about things on social media, Discord, whatever. We just know that this is what it is. We can set our watches to it and we'll be fine.
Yeah. Although we very much will react to it and on this podcast and actually, seriously try and analyze it.
Yes, we will. And of course, we're going to talk things like Jacob Melanson. Should he be back up with the team? Everybody wants to see that. Jaden Schwartz being on the fourth line. Some goalie talk. And that's maybe slightly different than what we've been able to talk about with the goalies here recently, but definitely some interesting comments from Lane Lambert yesterday on one of these goaltenders. And then we'll get into, like I said, looking at the larger playoff picture now that things are a lot closer than they were a week or two ago. But of course, RJ, first we got to start off by thanking our wonderful sponsor, the law offices of Rico Tessendor.
Yes, and I kind of had the idea for the Rico read, and I know that we like to do PSAs sometimes. Of course, Rico can help you for any accidents on the road, and that's a big part of what he does. But I want to do something a little bit related to that because recently, of course, I go to Kraken Community Iceplex a lot. The Kraken practice there, we work there a lot. I play hockey games there, and I have noticed, especially recently, in that parking lot, in the KCI parking lot. Lot 9, right behind the building, right? People are driving pretty fast, and I feel like it's just getting faster. And I just want to give everyone PSA, just make sure you're aware of your surroundings, but also drivers, slow down a little bit, please. There's lots of people walking around. There's hockey players. There's kids there. There are a lot of youth tournaments on the weekend, and I've seen some cars just zooming through there. Looking at you, Tesla drivers, maybe a little bit because they got the Tesla charging lot in the back. Some people seem like they're in a really big hurry to go sit in their car for an hour and charge it up. So just cool it. You'll get there, I promise. But yeah, just PSA to everybody. But if unfortunately there is someone zooming along in that parking lot, you do get hit. You know who to call.
Yes, exactly. It does feel like all of the stop signs, whether it's the stops that are created if there's a pedestrian on that stretch kind of going from the parking lot over to KCI and the walkway there, or even that kind of 3-way stop coming up from, if you get just got off the 5 and you're coming up to KCI there for that backside of the building, people really don't fully stop there. Lots of California rolling stops at that little intersection there now. And I agree with you on the Tesla owners. They're they're the one group of people that doesn't have to get out and then walk through that lot and walk across that street, right? Because they just sit in the car while it's charging. And so I think they don't quite realize how highly trafficked that is, especially on weekends like this past one where you had a youth tournament and you've got kids lugging gear all over the place. You want to make sure that they're safe. And while we hope none of you ever need his services, the odds say that at some point someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between. And when you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. Now, part of that read, RJ, I always say, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between, for us, that in between is that tiny stretch of road between the parking lot and KCI, because KCI is where our work is, and then the road kind of for us ends when we parked in the parking lot. So that is specifically what I'm referencing in the 100 plus reads I've done of this. Just know, everybody, that small stretch of road between between lot 9 and the backside of KCI, that's what I'm talking about.
Exactly. That's why we throw it in there.
Yeah,
because it's our in between. Yes.
Yeah, it's easily the most dangerous part of my commute.
I know, right?
All right, RJ, let's talk Jacob Melanson, because he's been sent back down to Coachella Valley and the team has not looked the same without him. And fans, other people we know in the media, and even Edzo on the broadcast is taking note that this team is just not the same without the energy that he has out there on the fourth line and the identity that he was helping bring to the Seattle Kraken squad. Do they need him back, RJ, now that they're struggling?
I think, in short, yes. I think I would like to see. I agree with Edzo. I agree with a lot of the fans that we're hearing from. I think the Kraken should find a way. And I think Edzo said something like, somehow, some way, he needs to be back up on this team. And I agree with that. And now I understand why they sent him down. I mean, we gamed it out and talked about it when it was time to do that last week, looking at who might be sent down. Of course, he is waivers exempt, so I understand why they did it. But after seeing the team without him for a few games, they really are lacking some of that energy that we did see from the fourth line. I know the fourth line gets a couple goals in the last game, and we'll talk about that as we decide, how they want to work this out. But I do think this team really misses what Jacob Melanson brings.
Right. And it's not like he was bringing a ton of scoring. That wasn't necessarily what he was bringing, but he was bringing a physical edge to the team. 65 hits in 15 games while he was out there. He was kind of helping create an identity for them. He was hard on the forecheck. You look at what that fourth line was able to accomplish when he was out there, and whether or not he was involved in the scoring, his line mates were certainly kind of getting involved in the scoring because of the space in the offensive zone he creates, his ability to go in on the forecheck and gain control of the puck in the corner or below the goal line. If there's a dump and chase and there's a line change, right, he can go out there and he can battle through that. And without him, the Kraken have some guys capable of doing that, but I don't know that anybody was as consistent with it as Jacob Melanson was. And that was something that was really special that he was kind of bringing there. And then also I think there was an element of the youth, the energy he has, the ability to get up the ice quickly, right? Showing off some surprising speed for somebody who is as physical and kind of plays that older school hockey style like he does. And just that need to prove yourself, where, you're playing above what you otherwise normally would, because you're trying to show to the coaching staff that, hey, I do belong in this lineup each and every game. And so you're always going out there with that hungry attitude. And other guys on this team have that. Of course, Ryan Winterton has that. Another young guy, Berkeley Catton, has that. Another young guy. But I feel like that was also part of the identity that was kind of helping things click for this group, was having a little bit of that hunger, wanting to go out there, wanting to prove yourself to the coaching staff, but to the league, and just also for yourself to feel like you do belong there. Get rid of some of that imposter syndrome that we hear a lot of guys talk about when they first enter the league. And Jacob Melanson really, I felt like, did a good job of bringing that in a positive way. And without him, things just feel different, even though that fourth line is continuing to be one of the most consistent lines the Kraken have.
Yeah, and I think there is something to be said for having that injection of youth, especially in the middle of a season. Look, the NHL season is a grind. It's a lot of games, and I think for veteran players, you're a professional, you've been there before, you know how to get through it. But I do think there is this, not going through the motions necessarily, but that's how you get through a grind of a schedule. You kind of have to treat every game the same. Whereas when you have a younger player step into the lineup like that, this is living the dream for that player and also trying to prove you belong. And I think it kind of rubs off on the other guys. I know on the broadcast, Edzo was saying there's certain guys that, when they're in the lineup, they make you feel bigger. And I think that would, like, everyone feel bigger.
Mhm.
And I know that was in reference to the hits, to the toughness, to all of that sort of thing. But I think there's some guys that maybe make you feel a little bit younger too, that give you that extra little bit of energy and juice. And I think that is kind of what they're missing. Now, I do wonder because, as you said, the fourth line has still played pretty well. They score a couple goals last game, and it was a different looking fourth line
Mhm.
where you had Ben Myers, Ryan Winterton, and Jaden Schwartz on the fourth line. We're not used to seeing that, but they do score a couple goals. Like, what is could you see Lane Lambert, having a problem with that? And after the game too, Lambert said he liked the fourth line. All the other lines need to be better. So I do wonder if he even sees that as a problem.
I mean, based on yesterday, like that is kind of the takeaway, right? That fourth line had 2 goals, and you only scored 3 of them, so it makes sense. And they were the 2 5-on-5 goals that you got. I look, Jaden Schwartz being on the fourth line, he's going to help out Ben Myers and Ryan Winterton, right? Like he's going to help create space for them. He's going to be the best line mate that they've had all season because he is a top 6 player playing on the fourth line. That should be the case. He's living up to it. You made a good point yesterday at the game when we were talking about it, about how, talk about taking advantage of matchups. Jaden Schwartz facing off against other teams' fourth lines. Yeah, he's going to produce in that spot, or at least he's going to make it so that his line mates produce like they did yesterday. So there is some benefit to having Jaden Schwartz down there, taking advantage of those matchups, helping those other guys stay going, even though Melanson's not out there with them. I think that it's one of those things that would be like the perfect, most luxurious of luxuries if you can like swing that as a team. It's just that right now, I mean, I read it all off at the beginning of this podcast. Kraken are struggling right now. You're out of a playoff spot right now. Doesn't feel like the time for luxuries the way that it maybe felt like 2 weeks ago if you were to do something like this. I feel like you need to get your top group going. We're going to talk later kind of, why I think the Kraken shouldn't be worried and then why I think they should be worried. One of the reasons they should be worried is that top 6 is still not super consistent, right? We had that great run of games with Matty Beniers, Jordan Eberle. They're starting to cool down a little bit. Nobody else is really kind of picking up that production. Jaden Schwartz could probably help them pick up that production in the top 6. You don't want him just down there making sure that Ben Myers and Ryan Winterton in their 11 minutes of ice time is really getting going.
Yeah, and it feels like that's kind of what that move was, because Schwartz was up in the top 6. You had Freddie Gaudreau down on the fourth line with Melanson off the roster. And for those few games, the fourth line did not look like difference makers in the way that they had in the past. And I think you took someone out of your top 6 to shore up the fourth line.
Yeah.
And that's not ideal.
No, it's not. And I'm with you. That's kind of the way it felt like. We'll see if we see it again, right? Like the one thing, even though that fourth line was really productive and was their best line yesterday, the team as a whole through, Utah game, the game yesterday, is struggling. And we'll see if Lane Lambert decides to kind of mix things up again. And if we see Jaden Schwartz pulled back up, or if it's one of those where Jaden Schwartz starts the game on the fourth line, if things aren't going well, gets bumped back up to the top 6, something like that. We'll kind of see. But there's another angle to the Jaden Schwartz conversation that we have to talk about, RJ, and that is with the trade deadline coming up. He is one of your veteran expiring contracts, somebody who's destined for unrestricted free agency come this offseason. Talk about needing a roster spot for Jacob Melanson, talk about how the Kraken should approach the deadline. It kind of seems like there might be something there where you can just move out Jaden Schwartz at the deadline, bring in some assets, and then, hey, it also frees up that roster spot and that spot on the fourth line for Jacob Melanson to come back up and make his return.
Yeah, I think it could make a lot of sense. And look, I think you need to find a way to get Jacob Melanson back on the roster, and that's going to require some kind of movement unless you have another injury. And so that was going to be my question to you: is you just, how would you do that? Would you explore a trade for Schwartz? Would you? I think the easiest way to do it is, well, I guess the easiest way would be to put, say, Ryan Winterton, send him down because he doesn't require waivers and you don't risk losing anybody. The alternative would be to send down Ben Myers. This is, if you're not looking at a trade, that's probably what I would do, is you send down Ben Myers. He has to go through waivers. You do risk him getting claimed. And I think that would be unfortunate if he was, because he's been a fantastic part of that fourth line. But you do have Freddie Gaudreau who can slot into that spot. He's a different type of player, but I think you're still probably okay. And that would be the way to do it, but still not ideal if you lose Ben Myers. And so, yeah, do you trade Jaden Schwartz? And I think if the plan is for him to be shoring up this fourth line, I think you should be looking at moving him. And I think this is probably the ideal way to go about this if you're in the Kraken's position, where I still think, and we'll talk about it later, whether they're destined for the playoffs or not. I still think they are. I still think you have to assume that you are, but you moved out Mason Marchment already. It turned out to be addition by subtraction. I don't think that would be the case with Jaden Schwartz. I think a different situation. But when you look at the lineup, it could free up a spot for a player who desperately needs to get back in there. And so if you can kind of strategically sell off your UFAs in a way that's not necessarily making your team worse in the present, or a whole lot worse, that might be a good way to kind of compromise between selling versus standing pat and keeping yourselves in the playoff race.
Yeah, no, it definitely could. It's a tough one. I mean, you and I have both talked about in the past, like, of the Kraken UFAs this upcoming offseason, Jaden Schwartz was kind of the one that if somebody was to stay, that would be our pick to be somebody who stayed, just because of how versatile he is, the kind of game that he plays, the value that adds to really whatever line that he's on, like we saw yesterday with it being on the fourth line. And so it would hurt in the sense that it feels like, of all the upcoming UFAs, you're moving out the one that probably gave you the most long-term value if you brought them back. Right.
Yeah. And I think the least value in I'm just guessing, but I think the least value in a trade return relative to his value to your team.
I agree. I don't think you're getting as much as you're kind of not necessarily giving up, but that you might have long-term from him. But at the same time, you look at the other UFAs from the forward group, you can't move them if you want to stay serious and stay in this playoff hunt and try to make the playoffs, right? Like, Jordan Eberle, how much long-term value is there now that he's 35, all of that stuff? Probably not a ton, but you know what you can't afford to lose? Your leading goal scorer and the guy who's tied for the team lead in points, right? That's kind of not something you do if you're actually trying to make the playoffs. You're not going to get rid of
throwing in the
player.
towel.
Yeah, and so they're not going to make a move there. Tolvaden, you're not going to make a move on. So it is one where Jaden Schwartz feels the most expendable in the short term, even though he probably has the most long-term value. One thing that I want to just touch on that you talked about was the idea of Freddie Gaudreau going back down to the fourth line, Ben Myers being the person moved out. Do we think the fourth line's better with Freddie Gaudreau as their center versus Ben Myers? I know, I'm just bringing this up. I don't think they are. I think Ben Myers has been better this season. They've played roughly the same amount of games, roughly the same amount of production. Ben Myers 10 percentage points higher in face-offs. Obviously, Freddie Gaudreau has been picking that up as of late, but I think the fourth line looks better with Ben Myers. Again, I think there's just like an element of speed that he brings. He's a very north-south player. This goes back to when the Kraken organization brought him in for Coachella Valley and what Dan Bilesma had to say about Ben Myers and what a pain he was to play against in the AHL and everything. And I think that the identity of what's been working for that fourth line has been having a little bit more speed, having a little bit more to prove, having all of that stuff. And Ben Myers, he embodies that, maybe not quite as much as Jacob Melanson, but a lot, and certainly more than Freddie Gaudreau.
All right. Well, question for you, Dylan. Assuming we're going off of just roster constraints, you're not trading anybody, and Schwartz moves into the top six, again, like he probably should be. Which of these, because you have to kind of pick one, which of these fourth lines do you think is best? So Winterton, Myers, Gaudreau, That's kind of what they had been running with before the last game. Melanson, Myers, Gaudreau, because you could send Winterton down, bring Melanson up, or Winterton, Gaudreau, Melanson, because that's the sending Myers down option. Which one of those sounds best to you?
That's a tough one.
Right?
It's probably Myers centering Gaudreau and Winterton.
Okay. So that's kind of what you have now. That's leaving
go.
Melanson down.
Yeah. I don't think, I mean, unless we want to like really go off the rails here and talk about like, you know, Gaudreau kind of being like a Mason Marchment, very different way, but just not quite fitting on the group that you have and with the identity that you're kind of building and finding under Lane Lambert. And so maybe does somebody else want him, but it's tough to do that to a free agent you just brought in or, trade.
Well, not a free, but guy you just traded for. But the thing with that also is I think Lane Lambert very much does believe that Freddie Gaudreau is.
Well, he's put him in the top 6.
He's put him in the top 6. He's put him everywhere. I mean, that's the irony is if you're saying he doesn't fit, he kind of fits everywhere. And that's the problem a little bit.
Yeah,
is that he fits in the top 6. He's been playing in the top 6, and maybe you don't want him there.
Right, and that's the thing is
but
that
the coach seems to.
Yes, but the coach seems to want Ryan Winterton, who's the only other guy that makes sense for Melanson. Is the idea that you have to pick one between Ryan Winterton and Jacob Melanson, and I do understand that Ryan Winterton, while a lot less flashy than Jacob Melanson, what he's adding to your team structurally is probably more important than Jacob Melanson's energy. At times, anyway. I mean, during streaks like this, when the team is struggling, maybe you do need a game or two where you just slide in a Jacob Melanson and you let that energy and the vibes kind of pick up everybody. But for the most part, what Ryan Winterton's bringing, it's just tough to say then that, as much as we all want Melanson back, there's just no path forward unless you lose somebody.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. And it's still kind of crazy to me that we're spending all this time debating about the fourth line and the permutations, how we want it to look and all this sort of thing, because it's so important, because they're relying on it so much to generate offense for the team. I mean, we shouldn't be having to think about the fourth line this much. I think that just signals a different, larger problem.
Yes, and in a perfect world, that would not be the case for sure, especially for a team that just fell out of a playoff spot. And not just like on points, but also by points percentage yesterday. That's generally not the conversation you want to be having. I will give you that. Anything else on Melanson, Schwartz, that kind of situation before we move on to goaltending?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. We talked about all the different fourth lines you could have. I think we covered it pretty well.
All right, so on to goaltending and specifically Joey Daccord. Because after yesterday's game, Lane Lambert had an interesting quote about Joey Daccord, arguably the most critical that Lane Lambert's been of any goaltender in his slightly over half a season as head coach of the Seattle Kraken. And look, based on numbers in the very extremely short term, both goalies are struggling right now. But certainly over a slightly larger sample size, Joey Daccord has been, as much as we've been pumping up Grew and talking about how legitimately good he has been here recently, Joey Daccord has struggled a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that is fair to say. And Lane Lambert, he was, and I think he's always pretty honest about his goaltending. And he said, I've got to think that there's maybe a couple we'd like to have back there and put us in a better chance to have an opportunity to win the game. And I think it's tough to gauge in that last game because there were so many goals with traffic in front, with screens, all that sorts of things. And he did say he'd have to go back and look at it, breakaway. It was not an easy night for Joey Daccord. And so I think even on the debrief, we defended him a little bit, saying, on certain ones, what can you do? But I think it has been a larger trend. And this is something we've noticed mostly when talking about Philip Grubauer, saying that, Grubauer should have the starting job right now. It feels a lot more comfortable with him in net. I think the team plays better with him in net right now. But on the flip side, you do have Joey Daccord, and that means that, he's of the two goalies, the one that is performing a little worse. And I think you see it in the numbers. His save percentage now falls under 900 on the season after the last game. And so I think it is something that's worth calling attention to, Lane Lambert, I mean, this could even be just a way to, just try and get a player going. A very run of the mill way. Again, he's not throwing his goalie under the bus. He's just like, yeah, maybe there's a couple that you'd want back. Very lightly saying it, but I think it is worth noting because he has rarely been critical of the team's goaltending this season. As you said, I think it was just basically just the one game in Edmonton, that 9-4 loss. Yes. He's like, yeah, goaltending was bad tonight, where I think we could all see that, and you don't think much of it. But that's really the only other time I can think of. And so this was a different tone than usual. And I think that is worth noting. And by the way, good on Kate Shefty, our friend, asking that question at the end of the presser too, because I was wondering about that.
Yeah, definitely. His quality start percentage is slipping, getting close to just 500 there for him as well. And then a goaltending stat that I virtually never talk about because I don't think that it's a good indicator for goalies, frankly, is goals against average. There's a reason we look at save percentage and we look at advanced stats, goals saved above expected, all of that kind of stuff. Traditionally, the one time I think that goals, the GAA is worth paying attention to is relative to the rest of that team's performance and understanding the system that they're playing, right? And so when I see his GAA getting close to 3, so the idea that he's allowing 3 goals per game on average, knowing the defensive system that the Kraken are playing in front of their netminders and relative to where Matt Murray was when he was healthy and where Philip Grubauer is now, I look at that and I look at that trend as a measure of, yeah, he's hit a rough patch. That is something I feel like you can look at and kind of tell that, look, behind a defensive team and a defensive structure that it has been kind to the goaltenders. This team is not in a position where if you're giving up 3 goals on average, they're going to win most of those games. That's just not how the Kraken are built and how they've been able to find sustained success this season. And so, again, don't normally like that stat at all. I don't think it tells you a lot. Certainly if you're comparing goalies from different teams, I think you have to throw it out the window completely. But when you're talking about multiple goalies on one team and you understand the system dynamics in place in front of them, I think it's something worth looking at. And something that you and I talked about yesterday, I've seen some people talk about it on the Discord, is, you kind of touched on it earlier, the idea that we're seeing the Kraken team that was kind of playing in front of Philip Grubauer these last couple of seasons, playing in front of Joey Daccord now. Kind of feels like they Freaky Friday'd themselves into which group, is kind of playing with more confidence and stuff in front of them. And look, we're seeing when, a lot of goaltending is dependent on the team in front of you, basically.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we've been saying for years, and usually in relation to Philip Grubauer, and that he hasn't been getting a whole lot of help in front of him. And I think he had, until this season, hadn't really been helping the guys in front of him a ton either. And so I think that has a way of feeding off of itself. Yeah. And especially, I think the Kraken all season, they play a solid defensive system. They don't give up nearly as much as they used to. They make it a lot more manageable on their goalies, but they do have times where they slip a little bit. And I think we'll cover that a lot in the general, like, reasons to be worried or not be worried, but especially at the starts of games recently, the Kraken have allowed some very high quality chances, and ones that frankly no goalie is going to stop. And I think that's why both goalies have struggled lately in their last couple games, is that you look at the opportunities that, say, like Boston had in that game in Boston where their backdoor tap-ins. Grubauer's not stopping that. Daccord's not stopping that. Doesn't matter. The shorthanded goal you allow against Utah, like, again, just tap in, pass across, like, neither goalie is going to stop that. And I think that has a way of, negatively impacting a goalie's confidence for the rest of the game. And then also it can just kind of spiral into how the team's playing in front of them. Again, you give up a shorthanded breakaway. You've done that twice in your last 3 games. You can't rely on the goalie to stop that every single time. And if he doesn't, it has a chance of spiraling.
Yes. I mean, and we've heard this from people before. I think Edzo talked about this during a Winter Classic once, maybe. The idea of what allowing a shorthanded goal does to a team and does to a group, forgetting about the goaltender for a second, power play is one of those opportunities where you are supposed to be building momentum. You're getting this opportunity. You have an extra player out there on the ice. And when the other team is able to score a shorthanded goal against you, the deflating effect that has on the group, and it's a lasting effect. The momentum swing from that is just one of the largest, momentum and emotional swings that can happen in a hockey game. And you're now talking about 3 games in a row, which has happened to the Kraken. I do think that is part of kind of what they're dealing with here. Moving forward, do you think that this is just kind of a signal? Hey, look, while Joey Daccord is kind of going through this rough patch, numbers are kind of slightly going in the wrong direction here for him. Should Lane Lambert just kind of lean on Philip Grubauer more instead of trying to do the alternating starts? Should he just kind of say, look, it's just going to be Gru's net for the next 2 weeks?
I don't know if I'd go that far as just say like every start for 2 weeks, because that's a lot. I mean, that almost
not
gets you up to
every,
the,
but like,
yeah, no, I would say yes.
one start for
And I think
Joey
he's
every
been,
3 or 4 games.
yes, and I think that is the way that I would go if I was Lane Lambert. Yeah, I think Philip Grubauer gives you a lot more confidence in net. And I think he's been leaning that way a little bit. You look at since that
Yeah.
run of like 4 back-to-backs ended, where that's just going to be every other goalie. Grubauer got the first start after that. He did get 2 starts in a row against New York and New Jersey. Yep. And so he has been essentially, it's been a split. It's been a timeshare for sure, but Grubauer has been the 1A to Joey Daccord's 1B. And I think it might be time to ramp that ratio up a little bit.
Yeah, just tweak it. See what happens. What do you have to lose right now when you've won 1 of your last 7 games? Right?
Like, not a whole lot.
There is a freedom in that a little bit. Again, you don't want to be in that spot, but if you do find yourself there, might as well live a little. Anything else on the goaltending?
I mean, not really. I have and as far as how it's going to go going forward, like I've got 0 predictive power on goaltending. Goaltending makes no sense. It never has, and it never will. I have no idea what's going to happen. And I think a lot of coaches are probably in that boat, honestly. As far as dealing with the goalie coaches know what they're doing. They work the best with the goalies. Like I'm sure Colin Zulianella knows what he's doing, but as a head coach, you just kind of have to ride the hot hand and hope that it all works out for you. We've seen bad goaltending sink coaches more times than we can count or think of. We've seen good goaltending elevate coaches into winning Jack Adams more times than we can think of. It is what it is.
It is. All right. On to the bigger picture here, RJ, because for the first time in a little while now, we're doing this podcast and the Kraken are not in a playoff spot. And like I said earlier, they're not in a playoff spot also based on points percentage, which has been through the vast majority of the season kind of a way of saying that they were doing better than just what the straight standings were showing. And that's because
they've always had the games in hand.
Yes, I was just going to say the Kraken have always had the games in hand. They don't really anymore, right? Like that games in hand advantage has been shrunk to either be even or like 1 game instead of the 2, 3, in some cases 4, 5 games that they've had over teams. How worried should Kraken fans be that the Kraken are kind of back in this spot? We had talked about it just last week, really, right? The idea that, look, the playoffs are the expectation now. The only way the Kraken don't find themselves in the postseason is if they kind of give it away. Their performance this past week, 4 points in your last 7 games, one could say that that's giving it away.
I think that does start to fit the definition a little bit, and certainly if you continue to play at that pace and the way that they're playing too, and unforced errors, concern. Things like that, it is a bit concerning, and it does look a bit like giving it away rather than you're facing a good opponent, you don't get the bounce, that sort of thing. I think there is a lot of meat on the bone if you look at these last 7 games, areas where they could have and probably should have won games that they didn't.
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, we could, if you want, go game by game, but I think just some of the big examples are like that 3rd period against Utah. One of their worst periods in a while. That was really rough. You look at the game yesterday, and I know a situation you want to talk about, which was them both on the player side and Lane Lambert kind of talking about knowing what to expect from Pittsburgh, and that Pittsburgh, and then basically not being able to do anything about it. And it's not like the Penguins are that good.
No, I mean they've certainly overperformed this season, but they should be a beatable team. You beat them earlier this season.
Right. But that's the first time that we've kind of heard that this year. We've heard that in the past, the idea of the players saying things along the lines of, look, we know what we should be doing, or we know what we're supposed to be doing, or we know what they're going to be doing, and it just doesn't seem to be mattering, and we don't know why. That's something that we've talked about in the past 2 seasons being an issue for them. This is the first time that we're starting to see that a little bit. And I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how they respond. I know you have lots of thoughts on that, so I'll kind of let you take it from here.
Yeah, I do, and it's something that I was curious about after the game last night against Pittsburgh, and I asked Ryan Lindgren about it seemed like a lot of those goals, and you pointed this out to me during the game, so I was just kind of forwarding your question along. But it seemed like a lot of the Penguins goals kind of came from distance where they had traffic in front of the net. That was the challenge for Joey Daccord. He had Penguins players right in
Couldn't
front
see
of his
anything.
face all game. Couldn't see anything. And so I asked Ryan Lindgren, was that just maybe unlucky, just pucks kind of getting through where they normally wouldn't, or is there something that can be improved there? And his answer, he started off by saying, well, we knew they were going to do that. We know that's what the Penguins do. They like to work it up to the point and get traffic in front. We need to do a better job of boxing out and doing that sort of thing. But it did stand out to me that, like, this is okay. That was the pre-scout. They know that's the sort of thing the Penguins are going to do. And yet, man, the Penguins just ate and ate and ate off of that, and they didn't really meet any resistance there. And it did remind me a little bit of stuff we've seen the last couple seasons. But that can happen for a game. But then what really potentially alarmed me was the answer from Lane Lambert when he was asked about, it's 3 games in a row now they've allowed a shorthanded goal. That's unacceptable. That cannot happen. He knows that. But he was asked if there was kind of any common thread between those 3 goals. I thought he did a good job breaking down what happened on each of the 3 goals, because they are kind of different. But when he talked about the shorthanded goal that they allowed in the Pittsburgh game, he said that basically the Kraken players were coached on what the Penguins would do on that very play, and yet they skated right into it anyway. And I'll read the quote here. We knew that they were locking the bench side with their forward, and their forward was going to step. And that was pre-scouted for our players. That was indicated to them. They saw a video on it, and they stepped, got a breakaway. That is potentially concerning to me because if you point that out specifically, and you can go back and watch, I'd recommend everyone go back and watch the video of that shorthanded goal. That's exactly what Lane Lambert's talking about. They're locking the bench side with their forward, which means that forward is going over to the side, where the benches are, and he is going to step up into Chandler Stevenson. And Stevenson has the puck. He's got to know that the pressure is coming if that's something from the pre-scout. So he must have seen a video on it. The player steps up and Stevenson just kind of abandons the puck. He doesn't even really try and move it. I don't know what, but he just steps out of the way essentially. And if you know that pressure is coming, you're doing something different with the puck. You're either dumping it in, you're sending a pass somewhere else, and it results in a breakaway the other way. This is the kind of thing we saw a lot over the last couple seasons, where in the morning skate, after the morning skate, we'd ask the players, well, what are the things you need to focus on for this specific opponent? And they'd be like, well, XYZ, this is what they do. We got to stop that. Coach would be like, oh, well, XYZ, this is what we got to do. We got to stop that. Great. They're on the same page. And then they would look the worst in that area that we had seen, it seemed like. And it was just game after game after game. And so we were questioning whether the group was even capable of zeroing in on a game plan, sticking to it, and playing in a way that was scripted for the specific opponent that you're facing. Under Lane Lambert, that has not been a problem at all. He's done an incredible job of keeping the players focused on the game plan and bought in, and to an extent that I didn't know was possible. That I'm really, really thoroughly impressed that he's been able to do that this much this season. And so I'm not concerned yet. If you want my personal opinion, I'm not concerned yet because it's one game and Lane Lambert has done such a good job at it. But this is the kind of thing that I think was among the very top as far as reasons the Kraken have struggled the last couple seasons. And it does bring back some old trauma with this. So there's a lot of potential concern there, even though I'm not concerned about this issue yet.
Yeah, I agree. And it kind of feels similar to when the Kraken were struggling through December, right? And they had that losing streak, and it felt like, okay, here we go again. The team's going to go on a long losing streak. They're going to become disinterested, and then that's it for the rest of the year, right? They're just out of it. They're never going to pull together and then go on some sort of winning streak and kind of correct for this. And we were wrong about that this year, right? Like Lane Lambert was able to get them pulled together. They were able to come back. They went on an incredible stretch before this most recent one. Like we talked about earlier, this team is streaky, uh, but they didn't. It never felt like during that losing stretch, like it did during the losing stretches the previous 2 years. And you and I both credit Lane Lambert for that. And because of what he was able to do there, yeah, I'm willing to give him and the group a one game benefit of the doubt that it was just weird matinee situation on a Monday. Things happen, right? They were all just too dazzled by Sidney Crosby on the other end.
I
It
know that's happened
happens.
to you plenty. You
It
can relate.
happens. It happens. And so I'm with you. I'm not too worried about it. It'll be interesting to see, like, moving forward. Obviously, your next game's the Islanders. I don't know how much there really is to kind of focus on there. That's a team that's just vibing. But as you move into the game against like Anaheim, New Jersey, Washington, Toronto, and then you go on the road, Vegas, Anaheim, LA, Dallas. Like this is a good stretch to kind of test that and to see what this team is going to do. And or do they one get it together just out of the losing streak again, like they did earlier this season? And two, can they start playing that matchup game and utilizing their pre-scouts, utilizing the stuff that they work on in video and take advantage of that to beat opponents that are, these are not going to be cakewalk games. And
Yeah,
I
no,
think that's important.
right, and I think they do face some decent teams in that stretch. I mean, and you're looking at leading right up to the Olympic break. You face again New York better in the standings than we would have thought
Yes.
this season, and always the potential to get goalied there. But Toronto always seems to give the Kraken fits. Vegas is. Yeah, I mean they're Vegas. They're
Vegas.
always dangerous, right? But then you also have some teams in there like you get Anaheim twice, without Leo Carlson, and they're a very beatable team, even though they're playing a little scrappy right now. They've been a little better, but like you've got a nice mix of teams in there that I think it's going to probably tell you the level that you're at. And I know Lane Lambert does not believe in like measuring stick games or anything like that. He's only focused on his own team. But I think for us, there's some good measuring stick games in there.
5 of these 8 games before you get to the Olympic break are against teams in a playoff position right now. And so, yeah, I think that's a fair measuring stick. If you want to be a playoff team, you want to get back into a playoff spot, go beat some of these playoff teams, right? Like, I think that that's a very fair thing. And especially the 2 games against Anaheim and the game against LA, because those are teams that you are directly battling for either third in the division or one of the 2 Western Conference wildcard spots with. Those are teams that are right there with you. And I have a list of why I'm concerned for the Kraken, why I'm not concerned for the Kraken, and both of those teams play a big role in both of those lists, and we'll get to those in just a second. But those are like the 3 games that if you're looking at this next stretch of 8 games and you say we have to win 3 of them, I think you have to start with those 3. And not only that, they're also the some of the most winnable games on here too.
Yeah, and I know like 2 of the you said they play against playoff teams. 5 of those games, 2 of those are against Anaheim, and they're not really
Yes.
a playoff caliber team. And so that's a team. It's just it's important that you win those 2 games. You're absolutely right, and especially I think avoid the temptation to going into the Olympic break. I know this is the kind of thing I could totally see the last couple seasons Kraken do is the last couple games. They're back to back right before the Olympic break. Maybe lose your focus a little bit, or certainly for that LA game as the last one before you're about to be off for almost a month. Maybe not bring your A game to that one. Got to resist that temptation.
Yeah, no, you have to deal with that in a way. And I guess LA is not technically in a playoff spot, but I'm counting it like it is just because it's important for the point swing. So it's really 4 of their last 8 are against playoff teams.
And 2 are against. Okay, this is okay. I was like, really? Where'd the hard schedule start happening? Because I remember the schedule is gonna be super easy. Okay, so it's 4 out of 8 against playoff teams, and 2 of them are Anaheim.
Yes, but that does mean that the non-playoff teams are New Jersey, Washington, and Toronto.
Yeah, they are Eastern Conference teams, so that's true.
They would be playoff teams if they were in the Western Conference.
Yeah. I just assume that with any Eastern team at this point.
Literally, basically. I mean, again, the Rangers are the worst team in that conference. I mean, they're bad. They're bad at home, but like they're still not like that.
I mean, Columbus
terrible.
is second worst. They're tied with the Kraken.
Yeah. It is crazy the difference between the two conferences. Going out further, just sticking with schedule, Kraken have 34 games left, if my math is correct. And I used a calculator, but still suspect.
Good job.
15 of those 34 games are against teams in playoff position right now. So again, the schedule's not brutal down the stretch. It's maybe a little tough right now. It's kind of tough at the end of the season. You look at your final, what is this, 6 games of the season, 4 of them are against playoff teams, and then you also have a game against the Kings in there. The only like kind of, game that doesn't qualify there is Calgary. You could potentially get some breaks. Like this is the end of the season for the Kraken. Minnesota, Vegas, Calgary, LA, Vegas, Colorado. Now, the one benefit is Colorado is not going to care about that last game at all.
They're going to have nothing to play for. And I think
0.
there's a chance Vegas might have nothing to play for.
I agree.
Like if they're more than 2 points or 3 points into the division lead, they might have nothing to play for. I think the Kraken might luck out immensely as far as the end of the schedule here. You could have your final 2 games against teams with nothing to play for.
I totally agree. And then you just got to, maybe LA's still hanging around. You got to take care of business there for that last one. But I think when you look at the schedule, like the schedule still is very kind to the Kraken the rest of the way. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not ready to hit the panic button when I look at the schedule, and I'll just kind of list and we can go over these things. I'll go through why I think they'll be okay. Then we can talk about why maybe they might not end up being okay. Why I think they'll be okay. Schedule. I just talked about that. I think we're in agreement there. Goaltending. Joey is not going to be, bad. Grubauer is looking great. The system is set up for both goaltenders to be successful. Behind it, you're always going to have at least one of them playing well. I think goaltending is a big reason why this team is going to be okay, even though they're not in a playoff spot today, January 20th.
Yeah, as much as I say I have 0 predictive power on goaltending, the vibes are generally pretty good, I think. I don't feel worried about it.
Exactly. Depth that this group has. I mean, we just talked about it. Fourth line was their best line yesterday. I think if you're running guys like Jaden Schwartz on your fourth line, you're going to be able to take advantage of matchups against teams, especially because you're not going to be playing playoff teams down the stretch. You should be able to take advantage and have good matchups in most of the games you have remaining and take advantage of that. And I think that's another reason why the Kraken will find a way to be good enough to get to the postseason.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that can derail a team's season at any moment is injuries. But with the Kraken, we've seen that's not the case. In fact, when they get better, when they have injuries, they get better. It makes no sense, but that's just what happens. The problem is they're too healthy right now. I'll add it to the this makes no sense file for this team.
Right. You get an injury, you get, Josh Mahura back in the lineup. You get Jacob Melanson back in the lineup, right? Like it's fine. So yeah, I think the depth is absolutely there. Kind of working off the goaltending thing, the system and keeping games low event. As long as they're able to kind of do that in the long run, I think this team is built to handle those kinds of games better than their opponents, especially when the vast majority of your opponents are not going to be playoff caliber teams. I think that just weighs pretty heavily in favor of the Kraken. And then the last one, when in regards to the Kraken, and then I'll talk about some other stuff why I think the Kraken will be okay. It's the power play. Got above league average power play. The power play looks good. If they're able to get 2 to 3 looks in a game, you're probably getting a goal from them. And then from there, if the Kraken get a goal off the power play, 2 on 5 on 5, if the Kraken get 3 goals, they're in any game.
Yeah, absolutely. And as much as the power play, I think rightfully has been getting a lot of criticism the last 3 games for allowing shorthanded goals. That needs to be stopped, but that's so easy to stop. Like not giving up a shorthanded goal is a very easy thing to do. I don't see them giving up more shorties for a while. But aside from that, the power play has looked pretty good. And it's, I think, for consistent and sustainable reasons, like just watching it, they are generating a ton of offense, a ton of high quality chances on that too. I think the Kraken broadcast did a good job breaking down, or at least listing the stats from the power play as far as even things like expected goals or earned goals or things like that, where they are generating the level of quality. They're not just getting lucky with their shots.
Yeah, I totally agree. The player movement's been there. I have no bad things to say about their power play outside of giving up the shorthanded goals, because like that's the
There's one bad thing.
expectation is that that shouldn't be happening. And it's happening right now. But again, the team's streaky. Hopefully the streak has happened 3 in a row. They're done. We're not going to deal with this for like a year and a half. As for the other reasons why I think the Kraken will be okay, these things all pertain to other teams. You mentioned it already. Leo Carlson is out for the Ducks. He's going to be out 3 to 5 weeks. So that's a good chunk of time that he's going to be out. Granted, some of that's going to get eaten up by the Olympic break, which also unfortunate for him. He's not going to be able to play for Sweden, probably based on this pretty gnarly procedure he had to have. But that definitely hurts Anaheim. He is their best player. Him not being out there, forcing and changing around things so that Mason McTavish has to be the 1C and get some of the matchups that Leo Carlson gets. I don't know that Mason McTavish is capable of winning those battles the way Leo Carlson was. So that's a good thing, is that Anaheim is going to struggle without Leo Carlson. San Jose, another team in this mix, right? Their underlying numbers are just as bad as the Kraken's. They could fall apart at any moment. Any moment, the Sharks should, in theory, be falling apart. They should have fallen apart already, which means they're due. And that's another thing that goes in favor of the Kraken. There is just that they could just drop off and go 0-7-3 over their last 10.
Yeah, the whole thing's being held together by Macklin Celebrity,
It
just
really
on an
is.
unheard of run as far as generating offense. And so that could either just end where, the shooting percentage while he's on the ice goes back to something reasonable that we've ever seen before, or, talk about, I said injuries can derail any team season anytime. There's one player the Sharks cannot afford to lose. And if he were to get hurt, I feel like
It's
that's
over.
it.
It's completely over. The Kings, we've talked about them a lot on Red Glare podcast, and in various things. They just look kind of washed and uninspired right now, and they can't score at all reliably. So that's a huge positive for the Kraken, is that the Kings, I just don't think they're going to be a legitimate threat down the stretch for those reasons.
No, I mean, there's one thing they know how to do, and it's lose 2-1 in overtime. It feels like that's kind of what they do, and it's completely uninspired. And you know what they could do to save their season? Fire the coach.
Fire the coach.
That tends to work out, but they seem very determined not to want to do that. So they are completely uninterested in saving their season. So I mean, they're basically waving the white flag.
Yep, definitely. And then we talked about it a lot last week. The idea of teams that you might have to face in the first round of the playoffs and are going to be in the division. That the Kraken have to play a couple more times. Vegas and Edmonton. Goaltending's just been really rough for both of them. Now, those are the reasons why I think the Kraken are going to be okay. And look, for a change, a lot of those reasons have to do with the Kraken, right? Goaltending, the depth, the system, the power play, like they control their own destiny, and that's in that way, in a way that we haven't really felt in the last couple of years. And as far as them having things in the positive column, the things that I do worry about, and the things that would make me consider pushing the panic button just a little bit, the penalty kill is really rough. It's been maybe getting a little bit better here recently, but it is still really, really brutal. And it's one where even when they get the kills, it doesn't feel like, it feels like they got away with something, not that they, actually did it.
Yeah, they are just kind of hanging on. It feels like, hey, I mean, at least they're no longer last place in the NHL on the PK.
That's true.
Ottawa Senators surpassing them there. But yeah, it does still seem a little dicey. 72% is still not really good enough. I mean, you need a dynamite power play to kind of make up for that. And they have that. They do have the power play, but the PK is still an issue, and it has been all season.
Yep. Not enough scoring from the top group, and at least it hasn't been consistent. We've seen when the streaky guys are on their hot streaks, Matty Beniers, Jordan Eberle, Chandler Stevenson had a nice long point streak there. The Kraken win games. But none of those three guys, and really nobody on this team outside of Jared McCann, whose point production is pretty consistent when he's healthy and in the lineup, has been any sort of reliable night in, night out over long periods of time. They'll get hot for like a 2-week stretch, and then they'll lay dormant for 2+ weeks. And I think that that's just one of those things where if everybody kind of goes cold together, you end up in situations like the Kraken are in right now, where you just cannot add points in the standings.
Yeah, and it's something we've talked about really for years because this team has always needed to score by committee in order to score, and that is the danger with it is that you can't always count on somebody making something out of nothing. And I mean, that's there's a reason they're among the bottom of the league in scoring goals. Like they don't have anybody who's going to reliably do it.
Right. If you want points in the standings, you got to put points on the board on a personal level. And the Kraken just don't have guys that are good at doing that consistently and putting up points in large quantities. Like it would not surprise me if, again, the Kraken ends with, whoever their team lead is in points being the lowest team lead in the National Hockey League. That's just kind of the state the Kraken have always existed in. The final thing about the Kraken that worries me is the underlying numbers, right? Like I talked about with San Jose, at any given time, it could all fall apart. And as much as we've talked about, advanced models and expected goals models and stuff having some significant flaws, the fact that universally across any sort of model out there, the more reliable ones and the less reliable ones, all have the Seattle Kraken through the vast majority of the season as dead last in the league, tells me that there has to be something there. Even if they're not accounting for one thing that the Kraken are doing, how high could that one thing really kind of pull the Kraken up? It's probably not going to reverse things and say they're a top 5, top 10 in the league. And so I think that that's the other thing with this group is, again, they're just not great at generating chances. We talked about the finishing and the production a moment ago. It's also just being in the spots to generate those chances consistently that they struggle in.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the models and the analytics and all that sort of thing, I think there are definitely some people who have pushed back against that and say, well, the Kraken are doing certain things that the models don't take into account and all that sort of thing. And I think a lot of what they point to is defensively, that they're a better defensive team than what the models would say, and they're giving up a lot of maybe low quality shots that are just kind of juicing it with quantity and stuff like that. But man, Dylan, I watched the games and like I think about that Grubauer save that he makes when it's 3-1 Utah. That puck going right across the crease, incredible save, amazing save. And I could point to a number of these. I started just like keeping track of them over the last few games, where I'm just like, is that the stuff the models aren't taking into account? Like, is that really like? I think they are giving up those chances. The goaltending has just been incredible in those moments. Like, I really don't think there's a whole lot to that because like there are plenty of grade A chances that the Kraken are not getting scored on with this season, and I don't know. I'm still quite skeptical of that.
See, and I look at it kind of from the same angle, but at the other end of the ice, where I go, the eye test is telling me that these offensive chances just really are not there. Like this is a team that does not know how to set things up in the offensive zone and kind of create good looks for themselves and create the kind of looks that if you can create those looks consistently, you will score consistently and you will have guys that put up points to not be, the lowest team lead at the end of the year. So it's interesting that we kind of look at it from both ends. But that's kind of it on the Kraken side of things, of the things that worry me and the things that make me think that, yes, it's maybe panic time and the idea of the playoffs might be difficult to achieve. As for the teams around them, I look at LA and I say, as uninspired as they are, they're one coaching change away from that not being the case anymore. If they ever decide to do it, they're not going to do it. I know, but it is technically there. The other thing is just that it is a vet heavy team and it's a team filled with guys who have been there, done that. And at any given time, especially with how close the West is right now, can they will that team to like a 5-game win streak or like a, 4-2 and 4 last 10 record? Yeah, they could. If any team can have a 4-2 and 4 record over their last 10, it's this LA Kings team. And so I think I put that.
They're really missing Anze Kopitar too, and I don't know when he's supposed to be back.
I don't either, but like he would be the biggest vet of all the vets on the vet heavy team front. So that is something to look out for. Anaheim has legitimate scorers. I talked about Leo Carlsson being out. Again, the Olympic break's going to kind of eat into a lot of his injury recovery, assuming his recovery goes well and he doesn't have any setbacks. He's not going to miss too much actual NHL time. And you look at the rest of the league, the rest of that team, and as much as I don't believe in Mason McTavish as a 1C. The fact that you've got Granlund moves up as your 2C, he's capable of winning 2C matchups. I look at Cutter Gauthier, who's up to, I believe, 22 goals now on the season. He can score consistently. Troy Terry is a guy who can score consistently. They have enough guys in that group to put up goals each and every night. And as long as their defense shows up, they can get back to their winning ways based on that goal scoring, I think. And so that's something that worries me on the Anaheim front. Thing that worries me on the Sharks front is, one, the fact that they're vibing through anything right now is a big deal. That positive momentum and that self-belief within a locker room, we've talked about it in the past, it genuinely means something. And the Sharks have that more than any other team in the National Hockey League. Look at the bench after that goalie fight. When Nedeljkovic fights Bobrovsky, and then it cuts to the Sharks bench, and they're all losing their minds. They're so pumped up and fired up. It feels like there's something that happens almost every game that gets them that pumped up and fired up. And I just think when you're vibing that hard, that's not something to ignore. The other thing that shouldn't be ignored is they're adding pieces. They just went out and traded for Kiefer Sherwood. Like they're treating this seriously. They think that, hey, look, we're in a playoff spot. We want to stay in a playoff spot. And they're adding, he's one of the top deadline targets for a lot of teams. They're going out there proactively and bringing somebody like that into their lineup to give them a little bit more grit, kind of shore up some of the areas that they struggle in. I think that means you have to take the Sharks seriously.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Watching them at the morning skate I went to earlier this season. I know I've told the story a bunch of times, but I've never seen a team have more fun in a morning skate than what I saw there with the Sharks. And I think there is something to that for sure. And yeah, they're adding. I mean, that's the other thing we haven't really talked about this week is that just since we talked last on the podcast, two Pacific Division teams have made big additions ahead of the trade deadline, right? And so that's something to focus on. And, how will the Kraken respond? I mean, we're talking about the Kraken potentially selling off Jaden Schwartz, or, it sounded like Frank Sarvalli was saying Jamie Alexiak, like almost certainly going to move. I think they can afford that one. But,
Yeah.
If the Kraken are more on the selling side and the other Pacific teams are on the buying side, how does that impact things?
Exactly. I'll get Edmonton out of the way real quick so we can then talk about Vegas and the ad that they made. But really with both Vegas and Edmonton, like I've been talking about with them, and again, you're not so much competing for a playoff spot with them so much as you're going to have to probably face one of them if you do make the playoffs. And goaltending has been their big struggle. Edmonton, Tristan Jarry has come back for them, and they also got back-to-back shutouts from both him and Connor Ingram in their last two games. So goaltending may be figuring itself out if Tristan Jarry is able to come back and stay healthy. And then on the Vegas front, don't necessarily do anything directly in net, but they bring in Rasmus Andersson on the blue line, arguably, top blue line acquisition that was going to be out there this trade deadline. Vegas is able to land him in a big deal. He's going to add not just defense in front of their maybe iffy goaltending, but also offense from the blue line, kind of replace what they've lost in Alex Pietrangelo. That is something to take very seriously. Like Vegas is significantly scarier now that they have added him. And yes, I think it's worrisome that two of the top trade targets are off the board, ironically from Pacific Division teams to other Pacific Division teams that the Kraken are going to have to deal with down the stretch.
Yeah, I think that is going to be big. Look, with Vegas and Edmonton, I think we can just write those two off. The Kraken are not passing either of them. They don't need to, though.
Right. No, again, but they have to play them several more times this year. And if you do make the playoffs, you're facing one of them.
Yes. No, I think, if you get to the playoffs, that becomes a concern. But I think no matter who you're facing in the playoffs, it's very concerning for the Kraken. Like, you're going to be the underdog in any playoff series. And I think the team is judging all of the success by making the playoffs, not going any further. I think just a playoff berth is all they're looking at. But yeah, you don't need to pass those two teams. But again, I don't think you ever were.
No, like I said, they're strictly there just because you have to play them and they're in the division. I mean, you have to play Vegas 3 more times this season. That's more than anybody else.
There's a lot
that you have to play. So like there is reason to consider Vegas down the stretch here for the Kraken. But those are the reasons why I think the Kraken, maybe are not okay now that they have fallen out of a playoff spot and that this latest skid is kind of affecting them, just because I look at those other teams on a run. I look at where the Kraken are, and those are the things that I think are a problem. Looking at both those lists, right? If you want to say that they're pros and cons lists, I feel like certainly on the things that the Kraken can control front, which is just the stuff having to do with the Kraken. I feel like the pros outweigh the cons there. I feel like the depth, the goaltending, the structure, the power play kind of outweighs the PK, the not having a top producer in your top six, and some of those underlying numbers, which again could potentially be suspect. I feel like the pros outweigh the cons there, which is why after looking at everything to see if it's time to hit the panic button, I don't feel like it's time to hit the panic button.
I'm with you. I agree. I'm not hitting the panic button at all. For me, I tend to focus on the stuff that doesn't have to do with the Kraken and the way that they're playing, just because I think it actually is more important this season in particular.
Maybe this year.
And I look at that and I'm still, I know you're, seeing reasons to be worried about some of the other teams around them. I don't see it. The field really does not worry me. And I understand the reasons on both sides, but like even someone like Utah, like watching them play recently, they can't play defense. They don't know how to
No.
play defense. Like, I mean, they can maybe outscore a team like the Kraken. If you get the Kraken into a track meet, yeah, you're probably going to win that game. But like Utah doesn't worry me. None of these Pacific Division teams outside of Vegas and Edmonton worry me. And I think also with the way that they're playing, the Kraken are still on track. Like I know they've lost a bunch of games recently, but they're still like these haven't been ugly losses in the sense that they've ever given up. And that's the thing that would worry me is if I ever felt like within a game they kind of gave up, but they don't go away. I mean, they love to put themselves in 2-goal deficits. I didn't even mention that, but they come back from them and they it's amazing the rate in which they come back from those 2-goal deficits. And I mean, you could point to that as like the ultimate unsustainable thing, but we've seen the Kraken sustain a whole bunch of unsustainable things all season.
It's the vibe thing though, right? If we're going to say that it's legitimate for the Sharks, it has to be legitimate for the Kraken. And I do think that there's a legitimate vibe when this team is down by 2 or more, where they go, oh, I guess we need to turn it on and hit that next level. And then they find a way to hit that next level. Again, it creates a bigger conversation of why you're just not operating at that next level all the time. Why does it take something like that? But look, the point is they can get there. And when you just have to be in the top half of the league to make the playoffs, just getting there sometimes is generally enough to get you to the postseason.
Yeah, and even just getting to overtime in games, the point system I think is still in their favor. Certainly, if you're never going to be out of a game or can come back, if you're trailing, and I think still the idea that like a lot of teams they're not going to bother to put in the time and effort that it's going to take to beat the Kraken if they're playing really well and like again just not making mistakes, not giving them anything. That's been a big problem I think with this stretch is that all these last 3 games you've given up a shorthand, like you've given them something essentially for free, with the shorthanded goals, with the bad starts, things like that. I think that's very easy to solve and easy to fix. And if you just stop with the unforced errors, you're fine. You can bank enough points. The schedule doesn't, like I've said a million times, doesn't really get harder. You can just coast through an easy schedule, get to overtime enough times, get to like 88 standings points. Yep. Which is usually like 10 shy of what you need, and you'll still squeak into the playoffs and be fine. Like I feel like they're very much still on that track, and I'm not worried at all.
Yeah, I have a tiny bit of worry just because if you're not there, it means you're not there right now. But yeah. I think I it's not enough worry to be overly concerned and to be, I'm certainly not going to be out here dooming on social media or anything. I don't think anybody needs to do that yet. I think just let the rest of the next week or two kind of play out, and then it's like reevaluation time. But for me, like I said earlier, it's that stuff that the Kraken can control. If you're pre-scouting, make sure you actually do the things that you're learning from that pre-scout, right? Do that. If you're on the power play, don't get lazy with things. Don't give up those shorthanded opportunities. You take care of that. These games behave very differently. You potentially win the Pittsburgh game. You potentially win that Utah game just from that swing of momentum, right? Not going against you. I think those are things that the Kraken can control, and I think that those things will make a difference for them. So we'll see. We'll see. It's all we can do. This is all we can control is talking about it here. Kraken got to go and take care of the business themselves.
Yep, absolutely. And, sometimes there are things you can't control, like if someone's speeding through the KCI parking lot, and when the things that happen that you can't control, if it goes wrong for you, you know who to call.
That's right. Well, we hope none of you ever need his services. The odds say that at some point, someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between. And when you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. Thanks so much for listening, everybody, and we will see you all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.